Oh, hello Internet! This video is about polarization. What is it and how is it a problem? Because everyone says that it's a problem. But is it though? I will cut to the chase. If we take political polarization purely as an ideological separation within a polity, then it seems that there is nothing much new about it. It is the hostility that is, maybe not new, but increasingly at the forefront of political issues. So let me include that hostility in the concept of political polarization. It is this hostility that casts two sides as driving apart in some sense, but is it really necessary? Looking at things the way we have cast it here, that means that as two sides drive apart, they will drive to the far ends of some spectrum, maybe the far left and far right, so to speak. The linear form here suggests that these two ends will be as far apart as it is possible to be, but is this really what is happening? Maths cannot divide by zero. When we try to get there, the answer veers off towards either negative or positive infinity, and so the result is undefined. That much is correct, but now I will venture into personal speculation. It seems to me that positive infinity and negative infinity, while clearly not the same, share something qualitative. It is only the polarity that changes, and so, to quote every comic book villain ever, "We're not so different, you and I." This is how we get to the horseshoe. Horseshoe theory in politics is the proposal that the political spectrum is curved into a second dimension, which means that the two extremes are linearly closer than the length of the spectrum itself would suggest. Obviously, the name horseshoe implies that the extremes are really quite close together, and honestly this doesn't seem ridiculous to me, but on the other hand it could be debated, and who says that all spectrums are identical in this regard anyway? So why do I like horseshoe theory? Well, it seems to me that both the far left and the far right have a tendency towards authoritarianism, because once you get past a certain point, then the purity of your ideas means that you cannot bring yourself to compromise with the other side in any way whatsoever. It's my way or the highway. This is a feature of Western monotheism especially, but it can be seen in other places too. The reality, though, is that every single human is extremely ignorant, and communities fossilize ideas into dogmas with alarming ease. We should not be driving towards any extreme, at least that's the way I see it. Now, I am politically more left than right, and of course I'm perfectly balanced, so I think the right is the more extreme at the moment. My reasons for this are that the right is more overtly authoritarian and at times clearly anti-democratic. The more blatantly violent rhetoric is coming from the right, and the majority of politically motivated attacks are by the right. Yes, they are, if the data is comprehensive and you don't cherry-pick examples. But the left is not blameless. Calls for violence and violence itself do come out of the left. Marx is only a philosopher, he was not a prophet, but he was on the left and he licenses the use of violence, and many people on the left take his example. Even the idea of cancel culture, to me, starts to take on some rather violent tones. Activists will try and poo-poo this idea. They will claim that cancelling is just consequences for actions. And sure, but who gets to decide on those consequences? It is a new phenomenon that the opinions of a mob of people who know almost none of the nuance of a situation can lead to personal consequences that can be quite extreme for the individual. And I've got to be honest, I'm not sure it's being applied in a healthy way, on the left or the right. It is being used to achieve a catharsis by people who feel that their concerns are not being heard. And you know what? Your concerns aren't being heard, but is that particular individual really the person who needs to bear the brunt? All the rhetoric, by the way, about cultural Marxists and radical leftists coming out of the right has the same tone to me. It's just people creating boogeymen to scare people over to their side. On the one hand, people who have personal views that might be more traditional are not irredeemable bigots by that fact alone, even if they are rather obnoxious sometimes. And on the other hand, there are no radical leftists or cultural Marxists in power in any democracy anywhere in the world, and if you think there are, then you simply do not know the meaning of the word Marxist or the word leftist. Okay, I showed my colours there. I meant to. But you get the idea about the horseshoe, right? As you get to the extremes of the scale, the authoritarian impulse to destroy the opposition intensifies. This is the qualitative resemblance that represents the two horns of the horseshoe. This is the impulse to take power and proclaim judgment. Metaphorically, the more extreme you are, the more the horseshoe begins to look like this. This is how there can be totalitarian movements coming from either the left or the right. And this is why there is a need for a whole new way of looking at the political landscape. Because for the majority of people, the thing that you fear most is not the cause of your pain. Let me just finish by mentioning there is another kind of polarization, you know. In physics, when a wave moves along its axis, it can vibrate in different directions around the axis, up and down, side to side, and every possible diagonal. Some waves vibrate in many directions at once, but a strongly polarized wave vibrates in just one direction around its axis. And it is completely possible for two strongly polarized waves to move along exactly the same axis without interfering with each other at all. Now, you might get my implication there, and yes, it's probably a bit of an optimistic metaphor, but it reiterates the same point. Actually, the things about which we are most polarized are not the things which will materially affect us. I think that's good.